this webinar, and I think we have some interesting topics for you today, being the Burglar safety testing standards. I'm today's speaker for you. My name is Ron Brandhorst. I have about 20 years of experience in the glass industry and working 3 years now for Rheinland in the Netherlands, doing some testing and some certification. I am also a lead auditor for several items to audit it. We have made you a small agenda for today. Talk a little bit of our company, what are we doing, and in what fields are we active, and I'll take you with some testing standards. Because quite large standards, it is impossible to go in too deep today. I'll give you a short overview, and so you get an idea of what's going on here. This presentation will be recorded and will be sent to the attendees. And you have the possibility of putting your questions inside the chat box at the lower end of your present screen. And you have the possibility we will answer as soon as possible, but certainly at the end of this presentation. So please welcome to give you some questions, and it is an interesting meeting for all of us. Rheinland, a global player in the market. As you can see, they already started business in 1872 in Germany, with the headquarters in Cologne. We almost 20,000 employees worldwide, with laboratories active in 69 countries, and we own over 500 offices worldwide, and some turnover, as you can see. Since beginning of 2016, we have our new Netherlands headquarters in Arnhem. The history of it is that Rheinland entered the Dutch market in 2008 and put 3 locations in 2010. And they were quite large spread in the Netherlands, and so now we have a new head office with most of our services located in Arnhem. We have new laboratories, so we are very happy with that. And one of the things we do here is the testing of glass, and of course the testing for the burglar safety standards. The things we do here in Arnhem are glass testing and certification in a very wide field of activities. We do the wheelchair testing, some management, quality management, for instance the ISO 9001. We do research on coatings. Most of it is damage research, damage control. We do MC testing in a large laboratory in Leek, in the north of the Netherlands, in Groningen. And we do testing in the telecom market. And to our global competence center of glass. Rheinland is well involved in the testing in the glass business, and most of the testing are done here at our laboratories in Arnhem. We supply you 58 different tests, a large part for the construction and building industry, but we also do something about packaging and Tupperware. We test the bottles, for instance. We apply services for solar applications, photovoltaics modes. We do testing in the automotive glass business, glass as well as plastics, and we're testing and certification in windows and doors. And for Distributors have relations in 45 countries. That was in 2015, and we are still growing over there. In our new laboratory, we have a lot of accreditations based on glass, of course. We have 500 square meters available of services. We are covered in all 700 standards, and we do that with 8 experts. We have a lot of things we can support with. Over of the testing standards of the burglar safety. Why your glass and your construction should be tested or must be tested is that there are a lot of burglaries or a lot of burglary attempts going on. In the US, only 200 billion last year. And for the Netherlands, for instance, 250 attempts are done every day. And only 13% of those are solved. So you have problems with financial things, but also emotional. If a burglary attempt is going on most time afterwards, you have to place your doors or your glass or your infill elements, whatever, because the majority of the burglaries are done with force and some even with brute force. So it's our experience that if it takes too much effort to this burglary, that's the time your house will be bypassed. That was a lot of damage. And of course, your insurance company will also be very happy because there's a lot less damage done. So a lot of benefits for you. You can prove the quality of your product. So if thing has passed the requirements, you can show your test mark. You can put it on your own website, so you can do a lot of marketing with it. You have a unique selling position, so you can show that you are better than your competitors, at least that you have proven your quality. And in some countries, you even have a legal obligation for burglar safety. For instance, going on in the UK and in the Netherlands. So there are a lot of reasons to perform those things, and of course we can support you with that. Now, if we look at the standards for burglar safety, the first and maybe the well-known is the EN 356 that deals with glass in buildings and security glazing. And the scope of that said that it is intended as a test method to resistance of force, laying access to a room or to a building or to whatever you like, and move for a short period of time. Of course, you can break in the thing you like, and if you have sufficient time, you will get in. The main reason for this test is just to establish a certain delaying period, so that an alarm can go off, or the police can be warned, or it makes too much noise, or it takes too much time, and then the attempt will be broken off. And that gives you a classification related to which period of time this is. Gives you also a classification, the category of resistance. This is not assigned to a special application. So if you have, for instance, a jewelry shop, you must pick your own classification, your desired classification. Sometimes there are certain regulations or guidelines for that. For instance, an insurance company says take at least this or that category of resistance. So a certain delaying time is assured. On the other hand, if you have certain valuable items inside your home or your business or your office, then you might also want a certain category resistance. And also says that you should place your glazing products frame which can give appropriate resistance to attack, and it's very obvious. But of course, if you apply a certain force to your glazings, you want your surrounding frame to withstand the same force. It applies for cutouts and holes in your glazing. You can that will alter your odds, and it also provide a suitable support. Anything you change on your glazings will affect the resistance of the product, for the better and some for the worse, but it's something to keep in mind. For instance, there's also some definitions are listed. For instance, what is the meaning of a glazing product? Well, a glazing product can be just single glass, it can be with or without plastics, it can be single or multiple block construction, but it also says that it has to be of a uniform thickness, a whole area of the product. So one can imagine that a patterned glass is excluded from this standard, and so a white glass, which is actually a safety glass and not intended as a burglary resistance product. So in the standard you will find certain exclusions and certain applications of the product. It also has some substitution rules. If you have a glazing composition, you can exchange one individual ply for a ply of different thickness. Different color, but of the same thickness. And the rule is that it has no significant effect on the resistance of your composition. If you test the product, you mounting, you make an insulating glass of it. You can add another ply. You can a fire-resistant product to it, for instance. But you can also add some alarm wires, some heating wires. You can put print on your product. You can put coating, a surface coating on your product, etc., etc. And in the standards, some rules for the substitutions are given. As you can see here, types of test listed. The first ball drop test. The second is the X test, and the S is more severe than the ball drop test. So if you reach a classification by the X test, you have a higher classification than by the ball drop test. Those both two tests represent, for instance, a stone thrown at your glasses, or another object hit the glass. So it is an actual representation of the burglary attempt. Important that we normally ask you to supply at least 3 test pieces. That is what is noted in the test. Still glass, so it can be slightly damaged and therefore affect your resistance class or your test result. So normally we would ask you to send at least 4 samples. Because the breakage behavior of glass is not very consistent, so it has somewhat range of test results. We would like to establish a trend in the testing, so there we would like some extra samples to be received. The sizes of the test pieces are well defined in the standards, 1100 by 900 mm wide. The edges shall be free of chips and crack flaws, which look very obvious, but often it can be damaged somehow. we ask you to mark the exact site of the test samples. If metrical sample, it can be either side, of course. If asymmetrical, it is very important that you mark the attack site. And sometimes both sides need to be impacted. Then you can mark both sides, of course. Drop test is resistance to a hard body impact. The hard body impact being a steel ball of approximately 4 kilograms. The diameter is specified, and also well specified are the drop heights. Drop height, of course, is your impact is classified here, and the drop height, the higher the impact will be. For every drop height, 3 impacts, 3 balls will drop in a certain pattern, and the pattern is also well described in the standards. And for the highest class at the ball drop test, even 9 balls, 9 impacts will be put on the glass sample. So the self is quite severe. And what you will see is that if you have a very rigid sample, the sample will most of it break, but the ball will be reflected by the impact, and some get as high as 2 meters in the air again. It is performed at room temperature. The temperature is described in the standard. The humidity here is not described, but at normal room temperature the test can be performed. And after each impact, the loose fragments shall be removed so that you have a test reproducible. And if you perform the test again, you should get the same test results, or at least as close as possible. Also done that after each impact, it is laying on the test sample for 5 seconds, and then it does not penetrate the sample. It passes the requirements, and of course we do that for every 3 impacts or every 9 impacts. So if all impacts fail to penetrate the glass sample, then you have passed the requirements. The next here is the X test. 2 tools used, X and R. It surprises you, but if you try to break glass with the sharp side of an X, it's very hard to break the glass. That's why a hammer is used to the different glass plies available, and then a well-described X is used to penetrate the sample. And why the ad so well described? Well, you want the test to be reproducible, and you repeat it on several samples. You want to get the test results. So therefore, the thickness of the X head is described, as the of the blade and the hardness of the blade. And every 10 impacts, the blade even resharpened and checked for hardness. And if the ridge of the X head is when it's the X must even be replaced, and that's done to ensure your reproducibility of the test. But you try to break the glass, and you do it in a certain pattern. You try to make an opening of 400 millimeters square. On the edges of those squares, you put the glass. So if you have 400 by 400 millimeters, you should take at least 12 attempts to break the glass. So every side 3 times. But you must hit the glass such that every glass ply has been broken. Both the axe head as the hammer head is 2 kilograms in weight. And the hammer head is well described. It has a certain hardness and a certain radius, and it must be checked after each impact. The axe head and the hammer head is placed in a frame, in a test with a rigid and capable of the force, but just for ensuring that you make the right impact velocity, and this is something you have to be measured. So the angle of impact is measured, and altogether you get a certain impact energy. And here it's all done for your reproducibility of your test. For the X test, you have 3 categories of resistance: PSP, P7B, and P8B. 6B, the lowest class, you should undertake at least 30 strikes. BX strike and the hammerhead strikes together. And each over 70 strikes, then you come into the highest class, P8B. So you you are well informed about the way you start your hammerhead impact, and you rotate the every time 90 degrees, so that you always every time the same. You should reopen your two impacts. The heart is checked, the impact is checked, your velocity is measured, and you acquire an opening, but a claw hanging, then is pass the test. But if the opening and the glass is falling down on its own weight, then the opening is stained, and then you have failed the test. About the glass testing, for burglar resistance, you also test your questions, and that's more different from the glass testing. Because in the glass testing, you have a very good version of your test and your reproducibility, and in your constant testing, it is somewhat different because you have a whole lot of different constructions of possible constructions. Here is what is set in the scope of the standard. It is a system which specifies requirements and the classification systems, and it has to do with the burglar resistant characteristics, and it has to do with doors, the windows, curtain wallings, grills and shutters, and some items are excluded. For instance, garage doors and gates and barriers. There are some other standards for the testing of those. And here it says something about the resistance of attempts at forced entries. 1627 gives the requirements and the classifications. And there are other standards which describes the test methods. You will find 6 resistance classes. anything to do with your level force and the skill level of the burglar itself, and it represents actual burglary attempts. So what they have done, they have examined burglary attempts, and they have made certain resistance classes, so it matches with one another. Since in resistance class 3, you have an occasional burglar, but he uses heavy material. And in resistance class 5, that is a more severe class, you already have a skilled burglar, which has knowledge of the systems of your construction. So he knows the weak spots and the vulnerabilities of the construction. For standards, there are some definitions described. For instance, what is meant by burglar resistance. What is your burglar resistance product? And there it says it has to be a complete and a functioning element, thin and fastened, a function of resisting for entry, which has a fit force assisted by predefined tools. It is something about the grouping of your products. Not every product is in the same group. Say something about different classes for groups, and it has something to do with the opening of the elements. So you can turn a door, that is a normal door as we know it, or a normal turning window, then it's listed in group 1. For instance, a sliding door or sliding motion, that's everything takes to be done in group 2, and group 2 being the majority of your products. There is a smaller group 3, for instance, a roller shutter. You can have a normal window, which is in itself not burglary resistant. Then you can put a roller shutter on the outside, which has the function of burglary resistance, then into group 3. And then you have some special products which are listed in group 4, for instance, a grill or a ventilation opening or things like that. And besides that, in the 1627, you can also find your field of application. Certain product has been tested, a certain dimension. It does not mean that everything that is changed from your tested dimension, it has to be tested again. You can find some applications for that. And some substitutional rules. So, for instance, if your dimension is somewhat bigger or somewhat smaller, it might fall under the same tested product. And it can be very convenient, of course. In standards, some elements are given. For instance, the minimum requirements for glass infillings. In further test methods that we will see, usually glass is used in your construct. In the 1627, you will find a table with minimum requirements for your glass infillings. Have something else than glass, then your filling should be at least distance glass at that you are about to test and about the resistance glass you are about to test. And on in 1627, you can also find the requirements for your hardware. For instance, lock cylinders, or your furniture, or your locks, or hinges. It is listed in an annex in the standard. It is not separately tested here. It is tested in another way. that you can find the requirements for that for each class and for each group. If you test resistance class 1, then you need only one test specimen. All the other resistance classes, you need at least 2 test specimens. And you can also have more than one attack site or more than one opening. So you can have a construction product with a turning leaf, but also with a sliding leaf. That is possible. So that's procedures you can find in the standards EN 1628, 29 and 1613. Will be described later. Most, if you test for resistance class 1, you ought to follow some national rules, some national regulations, and that applies for all the things that is done. The European standards are a sound basis, but every country may have its own specifications and its own building regulations, so additional testing might be undertaken. You have more than one test specimen. Normally on the first test specimen you will do a static test, a dynamic test and a pre-test. And on the second sample you will undertake your main test. Well, let's talk about the standard for the static loading being the 1628. And it has a scope, and it's something about the test methods for determination of the resistance to static loading. Of course, it has to do with all the opening times which are listed here. This is what we call a long-term loading. Long-term being more than 5 seconds. And the loads you apply are listed in the EN 1627 for each different opening types or the groups you have specified before. And to give an indication, the loads can go from 3 kilonewtons up to 15 kilonewtons. The load itself can be quite severe. Ways of applying your loads. It can be done by a load applicator or by hooks or by straps, by pressure pads. The definitions of those applications are all listed in the standards. And one of the important things that are described there also are what they call locking points. If a movable leaf and a fixed part of your construction, then you have a connection between those tools, and it might be your locks, your bolts, your hinges, your fixings, your rings, your bearings, and whatever you can come up with, some junctions, and that's all listed under the term locking points. And those are the points that are loaded with the file listed in EN 1627. The sequence how to do that is described in Annex B of the standard. So we have a fixed sequence, and you move all those points. What I'm trying to do is force an opening between the turn leaf or the leaf is moving and the fixed leaf. To assess whether or not you have a big opening, you can use gap gauges of a certain diameter or a certain shape. Use glass in this test. The glass pane offering the highest security level shall be positioned on the attack side of the sample. For the resistance classes, the glass itself is not attacked. And for higher classes, it certainly will. But the highest security level should be positioned on the outside, the attack of your sample. Is be done also at room temperature, ambient temperatures. The differences between that are described in the standards. So normal room temperature is sufficient for your test here. Short summary of the test. You use gap codes to look at the attack side of the sample, at the locking points, the connection points. Which does not penetrate the test specimen or the opening that is forced, then it has passed the requirements. Well, that's a dynamic loading test. And a dynamic loading test is a short load, a short force applied. Of course, the opening which are listed here, the turning, the tilting, the sliding, etc. Standard, of course, has a scope which is quite similar to the previous scope in the loading. It's all for the determination of the resistance to dynamic loading and assess the burglar resistant properties of your product. Some definitions of the case are listed here. For instance, your impacting unit, impactor, which is suspended by a suitable cable, a steel cable, and the pendulum action itself is a body used to strike the test specimen at different locations. Impactor is actually the same as is used in the pendulum impact for the glass, which is listed in EN 12600, and you can find a full description there of the impactor. 100 it is used to establish whether or not you have a safety glazing, and here it is used for applying a force on your construction product to see if it can withstand a burglary attack. And the impact points are also well described. The forces applied, drop height you should take is also listed in standard EN 1627. Again, each test specimen is a full functioning product with frames, the hardware, the guide rails, your tubing, your accessory, and everything was a product in normal day practice. And will also be done in accordance with the manufacturer's instructions. And the glass offering the highest security level is positioned on the outside of the sample. As I explained before, you can use here the same sample as you have done under the sting loading. The sample must be checked, see if it's still fully functioning. If that is the case, you can still use it for the dynamic loading test. So that's quite convenient. You should not have another sample. So you can go on with your test quite easily. This test is done in ambient temperatures and room temperatures. long hardware can be disengaged from the attack site, so it does not influence your different groups of of opening. You would different impact points and also different drop heights. And if an opening is forced, you use a gap gauge to a failure of test. You can do that by applying a force of 200 newtons or 20 kilograms. You can also find in the standards your test sequence so that you know which impact point to be impacted first and then all other impact points. So you strike the test specimen by a pendulum impact, which is suspended by a steel cable for fixed length. Height is regulated by the different groups and the different drop heights. It is in product, which is inspected after the static loading test. And installation is done by the manufacturer's instructions, used as subframe for the cleaning of the sample. And if you use a glass infill, the highest security level is on the attack side. And which I have spoken of before, so we can skip that. Then we go to the last. There is manual burglary attempts. Actually trying to do is mimic an actual burglar attempt. So we have set up a sets of tools which presents actual burglar attempts undertaken. Of course, this standard also has a scope. This is method for the determination of the resistance to manual burglary attempts. And here you would like to test the burglar resistant characteristics of your building product. Definitions are listed in the standards. Once your tool sets are clearly described, because it's a manual attack, your resistance time is described. Every resistance class has its own resistance time. Total time can be up to 50 minutes. Are allowed to undertake some resting times. Itself can be restraining or straight for the test persons. If you change some tools, there is tool time, but there is observation time. Some member of the test team will observe the test, and all those times together will result in a total test time, and that will be from 15 to up to 50 minutes. The test team consists of at least 2 people. Two people shall be capable of performing the manual test. At least is competent of recording the data and do the observations. And of course, those people must be well motivated to maintain a sustained burglary attack. It can be physically tiring for the test persons. So if you look at the picture, you can see our strongest and most fitted person in the test, be one of it, of course. because the team must be capable of using a reasonable but not excessive force while doing the test. Of before, if you apply excessive force, you can get entry to any condition or to any glazing applied or any glass composition. If you have sufficient time and you do care anything about the noise that you make while being attempting burglary, you can get in anywhere. The test team must have some knowledge, and of course we take development of our skills and our expertise, so that we are able to detailed knowledge and understanding of the construction product to undertake a burglary attempt. We have not the test equipment and the measuring equipment, and we know to do with the tools. That is, we are trained regularly, and we can record the pre-test and the main test conducted on each test specimen. The areas are also described. Every construction product some weakness and some vulnerabilities. And resistance classes 2 to 4, the class itself shall not be directly attacked, and higher classes you might attack it. But what is mostly done is the glazing and infilling retention system is attacked, or try to penetrate or attack the hardware. That is what is mostly done. For higher classes, you might want to undertake an attempt to get through the class itself. To spell weak and vulnerable places in your construction, a pre is done. Most of the time it is done on first test specimen, which you have also used for static and dynamic loading test. If it's still functioning, you can do a test here. And what you do here is apply loads for a certain amount of time on the weak spots. And you do for the expected resistance class. Take your next test specimen where you perform your main test. So now you know where the weak spots are, where the vulnerabilities are. You know a certain way of how to attack your construction product. And that gives you a good representation of the actual burglary attack. So it is somehow reproducible. By doing that, you have certain tool sets available. Some of it are listed here. And low classes, your tool sets are quite simple. And when you go to a higher resistance class, some other tools are added. So in the highest class, you can use all the tools from all the tool sets. So you have a wide range of tools available. And you can pass the test if no accessible opening is obtained. The openings are also assessed by your gap code. So a diameter of gap codes can pass or cannot pass through an opening. And you can do that for a certain amount of time. So a short summary of the burglary attempt. You have an attack areas, you fill a pre-test, and you do a main test. So one imagine if you have done the static loading test and the dynamic loading test, and then you have to perform a manual burglary attack on a pre-test on your first sample, and a main test on the second sample. Some will get very tired after performing all those tests. So it is really straining on the test person. Well, actually concludes all the test standards for the burglar safety. The N356, which was the ball drop test, and the X and ham test for the glass. The 1627, which gives the requirements and the classifications for the burglar resistance. 3 actual test methods. The static loading test, which was performed on the first test specimen, and the dynamic loading, which is all done on the first test specimen, which are mechanical tests. And then you do the manual burglary attempt test, which is a 1630. You do a pre-test on the first sample and then the main test on the second sample. So that concludes our testing standards. You have questions for me which I can answer to clarify what we have discussed. Question here. Resistance test applicable for all types of material. Yeah, you can apply it on a wooden or a PC, aluminium or a steel construction. Itself does not change for different types of materials. And why to attack the glass in the manual attack? Well, intention of the test is to attack the construction itself. You have applied forces on the attack on us in the EN356, and which actually quite severe impacts, representing quite some loads. And if you would apply it on the glass in the lower resistance classes, you are not sure you will get the same test results. And if you apply a certain resistance class of glass construction products, it makes your product more rigid, more resistant to the burglary attempt. Another question. For infill panels form the like the EN1628. Well, the infill panels, if they are not glass, should resist this type of force rely on your product in a certain risk class. But those tests are not actually intended for your infills, only for the construction itself. And what I like to do is to test all your digging points. That is what you are attacking mainly, or you are attacking your retention system. You can force that. You can remove your infill. Then you have for sure a certain opening or a large opening. No further questions. Of course, we are very happy to answer afterwards. I can recall that this webinar was recorded and it will be sent to you. So you will receive the presentation, and of course, if you have questions afterwards, we're happy to answer them for you. And also point out that besides those testing standards, there are some other testing standards, for instance, for garage doors or barriers, or there might be some requirements of your local regulations. Okay, if there are no further questions, I thank all the attendants for your and for your and I say now.